Hello. This is the part where I sit and wait for everything to work properly. Yes, now is the time to pause. Pause the Bob Ross. Yeah, so I guess I'll get right into it. Somebody's asking how to pronounce my last name, which is great because that's part of my intro. So, hi, I'm Grant Schronkweiler. I'm a producer at Epic Games. I'm working on a game called Fortnite. If you haven't heard of it, check out Fortnite. If you have heard of it, cool. So first off, I just wanted to get into, yes, the shirt is advertising. First off, I wanted to get into what are we going to get into tonight. I'm going to do a quick presentation that I've done a couple times that goes through my journey in the craziness of this industry. Hopefully should preemptively answer some of your questions, and then we'll get into the Q&A part. As we're going, just post questions in chat. Some of you have already posted questions. I'll get into those first. We'll go through those first. There's like 28 or so, so hopefully we can get through those pretty quickly. And then I'll get into the ones in chat. Any that I don't get to tonight, I will try and answer online or try and answer at a later date. So without further ado, this is all new to me, by the way, so if anything's broken, just shout out. So without further ado, I'm going to start with this quick presentation and go through it and talk a little bit about my life, because I like to talk about my life. Okay. All right, so there we go. So sorry, I just always wanted to slide with my face on it. You know, it tells a lot about who I am. So who am I? This is a really deep question. I've been working through it with a therapist for many years, and currently we still don't have an answer. But we'll start at the beginning. So again, my name is Grant Schronkweiler. There's my Twitter handle. I was born just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. You can see that right there. Yes, I'm a Reds fan. The World Series is over, so most of you won't care. There I plied my trade as a child for 9 years before moving across the river to Kentucky, where I lived until I went to Full Sail. I was always an avid gamer and sports fanatic, another form of gamer in my mind, longer conversation though. But it wasn't until I messed up my buddy's Pokemon Red that I thought about making games. I was so infuriated by both my mistakes and the lack of ability to fix it through player choice in the game that I sat down with my friend to write our own game. We worked for hours on a design doc that would eventually turn into Pokemon Killer. No, that's not my art, but clearly someone else had the same idea. An arcade shooter where you killed every Pokemon. After working on it for a few weeks, we sent the doc to Sony, who promptly responded, wow, that was awesome as a kid, that they didn't want to be sued, so no thank you. With our dreams smashed, we moved on to other things. I started modding and making levels for Warcraft 2 and Tribes 2. I was quickly drawn more to two-player hero co-op maps, which was a new thing in Warcraft 2, with some narrative. Matches were always really interesting because when people joined, I would have to explain the whole story to them. Even at that age, narrative and fun seemed like they should be hand in hand. Around that same time as well, I started working in the music industry. Yes, I understand this is child labor. Let's not get into it. I worked with hundreds of bands you've never heard of, and maybe 2 or 3 you have. But I learned a lot in this profession. I was a stagehand, a roadie, a show producer, a lighting tech, a live tech, audio tech, a recording engineer, and a producer. During this time, I also played many sports until I discovered my one true love, rugby, which has dominated my life ever since. And, you know, That's why I'm wearing a jersey today. Around my junior year of high school, I realized I didn't want to do the music industry thing for a career. Tons of reasons why. It is then that I realized this game dev thing that I have been doing as a hobby could maybe be a career. I had remembered reading about Full Sail for music while I was doing that, and I realized that they had a game development program and decided that might be interesting. After a lot of research and some other things, I ended up going to Full Sail. This is a picture of me on the day I got my laptop, and it was all hunky dory. But then I struggled. I was a straight A student in high school, and I got to Full Sail, and I failed the entrance exam, the math test, and I had to do a pre-class before I could then go into the full program. Then I got my first C and my first D ever in my life in my Programming 1 and Programming 2 classes. I was devastated, but I realized then and there that this is hard. That this is really hard. You have to work all of the time to be good enough to be in the industry or even just be successful in college. But don't give up. If you work hard, you can get there. The other thing I quickly learned was that I wasn't the smartest person in the room, so I became friends with the smartest people in the room. I asked them to help me. I asked them to explain things to me I didn't get. I studied nonstop. I got tutored. I did whatever I had to be successful. This is as much a make yourself aware of this, but also, hey, it's hard, but anybody can do it. This doesn't change after college either. I made games just like you have. This is actually the first game I ever made by myself. And in my spare time, I wrote a lot about what I was learning. I emailed authors of articles I liked. I networked anywhere and everywhere I could. I became best friends with my career advisor, Rob Coble. I followed him around pretty much. Okay, don't really follow people around, but for real, this guy is amazing. He gave me and still gives me incredible advice on more than just my resume, which is what most people think career advisors are there for. Right at the start of my final project, I got the awesome opportunity to be a CA at GDC, something I recommend all of you try, or at least try to get into. This gave me an instant network of over 2,000 working professionals, as well as the awesome opportunity to meet tons of new people, including some of my best friends. This picture is actually from my second year as a CA, and those people sitting near me, yes, the ones that look so very thrilled, happen to be some of my best friends, even to this day. My final project team agreed to work on something small and polished. I believe that this was key to our success. Instead of trying to do some big overscope thing, we made something really small and were able to polish on it for the last few months. And by the time graduation rolled around, all but 2 of the members of our team had jobs lined up. This was also freeing in our creative senses. After GDC, I sent out hundreds of resumes and actually got a few bites. But what really got me the in was when Rob hooked me up with a bunch of interviews, including Midway Games and a company called Merit Entertainment, aka Megatouch Games. I went on a few interviews and finally decided to take the offer from Megatouch as a game programmer. While there, I got to know everyone at the company really well. I got close with as many people as I could, going out to lunch and dinner with them and trying to ask their opinions and pick their brains on everything. One of the writers told me, "No one has ever talked to us before." This totally blew my mind. How can you make games that the writers work on and never talk to them? I knew something had to change. About a year after starting the job and about 4 games shipped as a programmer, the creative director asked me if I could help him with some problems on a game that he was working on. I did everything I could to help with a game I jokingly titled Funkier Monkey, the sequel to a much-loved game called Funky Monkey. I did everything asked of me and more on this game, sacrificing sleep and free time to show the creative director that I had what it took. Soon after the title wrapped, he said he liked what I did and asked me if I wanted to help out with more games. I, of course, jumped at the opportunity, and with the team came up with a game I knew my mother would love called Tug of Words. Yes, my mother was the inspiration for this game. I pulled ideas from ancient mythology for our characters and brought the whole team together to hash out ideas. This was kind of an unheard of process for the time at Megatouch. The game turned out so well that finally I had the authority to start making changes, but I didn't have a different title. I was still just a game programmer / designer. I was no lead or producer, so I had to go about this in an interesting way. I had to get the team's buy-in on every change I wanted to make, then have them champion the ideas for me. If this sounds like something out of Game of Thrones, well, it kind of is. I've also heard a similar thing called leading from the second chair, the idea of wanting to serve your team more than manage them. That's a big topic. We'll get into it another time. I got to work with some great lead programmers while at Megatouch, and over time, the lead programmers and myself, along with the rest of the guys who had come from Full Sail, surprisingly, were able to change the entire way we made games. I was eventually given the title lead designer and was in charge of most of the process of game development from start to finish. Flash forward a few years, 50 plus games shipped on 4 platforms, and we arrive at id. Remember how I mentioned Rob had gotten me an interview with Midway back before I graduated? That was key. I didn't just mention that because it was one of the cooler interviews I did. I didn't end up with the job, but I did end up meeting a bunch of people who are friends with me to this day. I continued to keep in touch with them, constantly sending them emails and asking how their projects were going, things like that. Side note, interviewing is incredibly a good way at networking. One of those friends was Carrie Barcroft, the head of HR. After Midway shut down, Carrie went to id. Every GDC, Carrie and I would hang out. Fast forward to GDC 2011, and Rob calls me and says, Carrie and I are hanging out. You should come join us. So I do, expecting just to hang out like normal. But while hanging out with them, Carrie tells me that id is interested in me. This isn't the first time she's jokingly, in my mind, mentioned that she would like to work together, but she meant it for real this time. We start to talk, and I realize this might be something I'm interested in. After chatting for a while, we part ways, and my buddy Matt Brenner smacks me on the back of the head and goes, if you pass this up, I'm kicking you out. We were roommates at the time, so this was a for real threat. So after months of thinking and planning, I took the job as a technical producer on the Rage multiplayer team. I got to the studio in June, and the game was scheduled to ship in October. Crunch mode was on. While hard and grueling at times, it was a ton of fun, and I was learning as fast as I could. Every ounce of my game development experience, all the way back to Full Sail, was drawn upon. But even while things were crazy on the product, I continued to do what had worked so well before. Meet as many people as I could, learned about their lives outside of work, what they loved to do, how many kids they had, and such. I also became a sponge to everything our lead producer, Deke Waters, said. Deke is one of the best producers in the industry, bar none, and I was very lucky to work with him. He allowed me to try lots of new things and new production ideas under his supervision. After Rage shipped, Deke moved on to another studio, and I was left to fill the void of senior producer. I quickly jumped in with both feet, relying on them on a team that I had built a strong bond with to help me wherever I slipped up. I tried lots of new things from a production standpoint, and not all of them worked, but the team was always willing to try. While I was at id, I was able to work on Rage and Doom 4, as well as help out a bit on Doom 3 BFG and Wolfenstein, the newer one. But after a few years, I felt it was time for a change. A friend of mine hooked me up with a recruiter, and I started looking for a new job. I loved my team at id, but I wanted a different challenge. I wanted to work on a game I truly loved and felt was different from everything else out there. I looked around and I interviewed at a bunch of places, and as a favor to a friend, I applied at Epic Games to be a producer on the engine team. While on my interview, it became very clear that I wasn't going to fit in on the engine team and that my passion and past experience would be best served on the Fortnite team. I had heard of the game and done a bunch of research. When they showed it to me and then let me talk to the team, I knew that this is where I was supposed to be. I fell in love with the game, and I totally loved the team. This was the game that I was supposed to work on. So fast forward a year and a half later, and here I am working on this amazing game that is in pre-alpha, and you all should sign up to play. All right. Hopefully you actually all saw that and heard me. All righty. I'm trying to get the chat situated and everything. All right. Yes, rugby. Cool. So hopefully that worked out for everybody and answered some of your earlier questions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start in on the Q&A. I have a bunch of questions that I'm going to go through here, and I'll mention the people what is love? I think it's a good question. I'll mention the people who asked the question, and hopefully you're in chat, and if you have a follow-up question or if I start to answer it wrong, just let me know. So JDB, and by the way, I'm totally going to read exactly the name you put in here, so if this isn't your name, I'm sorry. What's the easiest discipline to get into, and what do you think is the most difficult? Okay, so most people would say that the easiest discipline to get into would be QA. a lot of people are like, QA isn't a discipline or whatever, but it is. It's very important to the project. I consider them as much developers as I consider myself or any programmers or artists to be part of the team. That's definitely the easiest one to get into because it requires the least amount of experience. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a nobody or not know anything, but it is the least amount of hard skills that are needed to get into. As far as the hardest one to get into, it really depends. I would say art because I don't know how to art. I'm not good at art. But some people would say programming is harder. Really, they're both they're both up there. You have to have a resume. You have to have experience. You have to be able to show us that you know how to code, things like that. So those would be probably the easiest and hardest. What parts of the development process do you feel that the majority of people struggle with, and what could a newbie help to improve? This is from JDB as well. I would say it really depends. A lot of people would say, yeah, there's a lot of struggle with the finishing of a project. I would say that that's probably the hardest for everyone from indie to AAA, just because you have to finish at some point. You have to say, I'm done. I'm not going to work on this anymore. It's good enough. Let's ship it. I would say it's not only hard to say that, but it's also hard to get to a place where everybody is comfortable and you've gotten the most awesome stuff in. Now, for someone who's doing a solo project for the first time, just starting is going to be hard, right? Just getting going on a game is not the easiest thing to do. So I would say finishing out a game is probably the hardest, but some people would say pre-production is pretty hard as well. And last question from Jay, where do you see the industry of video games going in the next 10 years? Wow. This is a crazy question, and I actually get this fairly often. And a few years ago, I would not have said VR, but VR has really come in pretty heavy. So I think VR, AR, both of those are going to start to be even more in the industry. I think continued, console, PC, all that stuff is going to be big. I think we'll continue to see a move of more and more games to free to play because I think eventually consumers are going to demand it. Players are going to demand it. I mean, I would rather play a game for free, try a game for free than pay for it. But I don't think the AAA blockbusters are going to go away. I think indies will continue to rise. And then I think we'll see kind of the democratization of game development as tools like UE4 become free. And more development tools are becoming free. Anybody can start to make games. And, I talk with a lot of students of all ages, and I'm seeing more and more high schoolers now even making games. And back when I was in high school, my only real option was to use, something like the Warcraft editor. And I think there's much more options now for a young person. Donnie Lyle asks, what was your strategy when presented with opportunities to generalize and or specialize? So this is a pretty interesting question for me, and like all the questions, I'm answering them from my own viewpoint and my own experiences, so different people may say different things. But for me, I'm kind of a broad generalist. I spent many years programming. I spent several years designing, and I've been producing for about 5 years. I can do a lot of things okay, but I can't do many things great. I would rather have my programmers on my team program and my artist art and my designers design than me try and do those things. So it's an interesting place. I would say, if we're talking about a programmer, start out generalist and then pick one or two things that you're really interested in. I picked audio programming because I had an audio background, and I really kind of hammered that, in as I was getting close to finding a job, and I talked about that a lot. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I would say you want to be a journalist and then find your one or two things that you're really passionate about and start becoming a specialist in, because ultimately it's what you're going to be doing every day. Um, Kali Kohlberg asks, would you say you learned more skills when you did finally get the first job in the industry, or on your own by just looking things up and trying new techniques? Yeah, combination of both. That's a really great question. You learn more about making games in the first 2 months of making games professionally than you probably will in a games degree. I have a games degree and I learned a ton, but wow, you learn a lot in those first few months. It's just this full like reality shock. So I feel like as a producer, I've learned most of my information from on-the-job experience. As a designer, I learned most of my experience by doing a lot of research, doing game design challenges and things like that. And as a programmer, a little bit of both. So really, you're kind of doing all of the different things to learn as much as possible. Also, hello to everyone saying hello in the chat. I'm a bad person and I did not say hello. This is my first time. Sorry, I'm new to this. Sebastian Rodriguez, he has a couple questions. His first question is, what skill, regardless of discipline, is undervalued by people looking to enter the industry? Examples of skills being knowing how to model in Maya if you're a programmer, or knowing how to make scripts even if you're a designer artist. So I'm actually going to start with a soft skill or a non-hard skill, and saying soft skills in general. And I'm sorry, my camera keeps refocusing. I have so much motion. I would say soft skills in general. So being able to talk to people, having good writing skills, punctuation, spelling. Now, cool thing is, I'm a bad speller, but the internet is not a bad speller. So I use that. But those soft skills, being able to connect with your team, because ultimately working with a team is one of the most important things that you are going to do. Being a good teammate. I gave a whole talk on that. I think it's up on my YouTube channel. So I would say from a soft skills, or from the first answer would be soft skills. From the next answer, I would say programming in general. Any form of scripting or programming as a designer is super valuable. As a programmer, super valuable. As an artist, you can write Maya scripting and stuff like that. I have a wide range of weird skills that I've learned, from audio editing to Photoshop to Premiere to whatever. If you go to a game jam is a great example. You end up doing something that is probably not your skill. I think the last game jam I took part in, I made audio and I edited scripts and did merging. It was weird. It was not anything I was trained in doing, but that's what we did. From Sebastian again, California holds almost 50% of the video game job opportunities in the US. Curious where you got that number. That sounds right. Would you recommend someone looking to enter the industry to try their hand first in California or try other places? Well, the beauty of the industry really in the last few years, even from when I started to now, is that the industry is everywhere. I found out the other day that there's a game development team in my hometown, which is crazy. So really, I would say, step one, pick a studio or game that you want to work on and look there. Step two, pick a town, or city, place you want to live and look in that area. You don't necessarily have to live in California. I've been in the industry for almost 8 years and I've never lived in California. It's not to say I don't love California. I love San Francisco, good places out there, but I've never had to live there. And there's plenty of jobs in other places. Last question from Sebastian. Following my second question, how common are online interviews in the gaming industry? So they're fairly common. I've heard of probably 5 to 15 different places, major places that will do Skype or Google Hangouts for interviews before an in-person, some places as well as an in-person. I would never accept a job without doing an in-person interview because you want to meet the team, you want to see the studio. If you've never been to the city, you want to learn about it, all those things. But fairly common, especially if you're doing freelance and stuff. And I think even more so now than ever before, a lot of outsourcing companies and people working freelance, pretty common. But yeah, definitely a phone interview would be before an on-site interview, and some people do those online. Justin Camden asks, is there a demand for business knowledge within the industry? And if so, how likely are you to be actually designing a game instead of just handling financial matters? If you have a business degree and you come into the industry as a business person, you're going to do business. You're not going to do game design. You probably won't be involved in game design. You may not even see the games you're working on, unless you go to a super small studio. I mean, if you're like, hey, I know business, but I also know game design and I have some of these skills. Can I come work at your 5-person studio? Then you're going to do everything. But yeah, it's not super uncommon. It depends on where you want to go. You know, there's definitely places that need business people. The industry's huge now. You know, even places like Epic have business-focused people. But it depends on what you want to do. If you want to be a game designer, you should start doing game design. Sean Korb, hi Sean, asks, what is the best way to show that just because you don't have years of experience doesn't mean you aren't qualified for the job? How do you tailor your resume to show that you are new in the field, but the past 3 years of college is a similar experience? This is a great question. I'm sure there's multiple people on from Full Sail. And when I was at Full Sail, I kind of went through this whole thing as well. I was like, well, I've been making games for 2 years in a team environment, in a high stress environment, but not professionally. How do I represent that? It's all about the way you present your work and the way you write your resume, right? So if you write your resume saying, hey, you know, I was in college and this is my GPA and that's it, no value. What you should put is, I went to college here, and then put, I was on these teams while at college, student teams, and we made these games, or I did these games by myself. This is what I did, and be ready to talk about that stuff. That was really the most important thing for me. I hate to give this advice out because my recruiter friends and my HR friends are going to hate me for saying this, but when a job says 2+ years experience and you feel like you have 2+ years experience but not in a professional environment, go ahead and apply. Like I said, I applied to hundreds of jobs, and probably 90% of those said 2+ years experience. Now, out of that, I only got 3 or 4 on-site interviews. This is when I was first breaking in. But I got a bunch of phone calls, and even though I failed or didn't get past the phone calls, they were great. I learned a lot. I learned how to present myself. I learned better ways of speaking. You know, one of the tips that I learned was, if I stand up in a phone interview, I interview 10 times better. Super weird. I'm what's called peripatetic. I think better when I walk. I talk better when I walk. So I walk around. So, oops, wrong button there. From Sean again, how do you stand out? Wow, broad question. I'll read the rest of it. I was recently tasked at making my first resume for the field. I want to get into and made a very artsy resume with one of my artworks I'm most proud of on the resume. As a company, does doing something that bold make you stand out? Was it too much? Everyone has such a different opinion on resumes, and I know there is no real correct way to do a resume. So yeah, you kind of answered your question there, but I'll give my advice, my opinion. You know, and I'm just going to knock all the resume questions out at one blow here. If you're new to the industry, your resume shouldn't be more than 1 page. Like I said, I've been in the industry for almost 8 years. My resume is still 1 page. I've worked on at 3 different places. I've worked on 54 ship titles. Now, granted, caveat when I say that number, 50 of those were small mini games, but each one was considered an individual title. It's weird. But 1 page, relevant work experience, probably past job history, but don't put any information unless maybe you're a manager, you're looking for that. But put where you went to school. I don't give a shit about your GPA. Unless you're a 4.0 student, then I'm going to be like, whoa, look at you, smarty pants. Really, I care about knowledge. So putting what tools you know how to use, what things you're experienced with, and I care about the projects you've worked on. You know, some people say put a mission statement or put a statement up top. You know, I prefer to have that stuff in a cover letter. I would prefer to have artwork just stay in its portfolio. But, you know, I would say try whatever you have to try. You know, if you apply to a place and they don't reply, and you're like, hey, I really want to work here, it's worth giving it another shot to do something crazy with your resume. But make sure it looks professional and is still readable and is still one page. Last question from Sean here. How do you reach out to your network when the time comes to see if any of them might know of a position at their companies? How do you ask for a favor without sounding like you're using them for an in? I think it's totally cool to send an email out as more of an update, like a family newsletter, if you will, that's like, hey, I'm graduating in a couple months, I'm really looking for jobs at these places, and then say, I saw you guys have an opening, or I was wondering if you guys might have an opening there. And it's cool to ask that question, but don't ask for a referral of someone you don't know really well, right? So, if we've chatted online a few times and you come to me and you're like, hey, are there any jobs for new people in this field? Cool, that's a great conversation. But if I reply, yeah, go ahead and apply, that should be the end of it. You shouldn't reply with, hey, can you recommend me? I'm very, very particular about the people I recommend. I'm very particular about how I recommend people. Your reputation is incredibly important in this industry. And the moment you recommend somebody that isn't good, your reputation goes down. The industry's still pretty small. Word's going to spread. So Jorge Roland asks, I'm currently enrolled in University of Houston under the computer it focuses a lot on coding so far. There's a few higher level courses that deal with animation and art. For courses, I know that places like DigiPen and Full Sail, and there's a master's program at Guildhall, and a bunch of new places are working on getting their game design programs up to date, but they're not quite there yet. I think learning how to program is incredibly valuable. Kind of learning these extra skills of animation and art are valuable. I also learned, and I've used them. I've used modeling once, so that's not really much. But I think learning a program is good for games. Programming in to get them, of course, because I work there. UBForce free. Get into it. There's plenty of great resources, and start building games. I mean, really, ultimately, for all of you, my best advice is build games. From Jorge again. Is this the type of career where you get better from on-the-job experience, or would I have to know everything I need to know right off the bat as I start off my first game designing job? Have any of you ever heard the, hold on. I have a prop. This is to start by answering, no, you will not know everything. You do not need to know everything. So on a rugby ball, like a basketball, there are little ridges, little dots. See them? They're little. What I like to tell people, and this is from several coaches, that little dot, that's how much you know as a student about game development. Oh, about the size of a penny. That's how much I know after 8 years. This ball is how much there is to know. So no, you won't know everything. One day, maybe 30, 40 years into the industry, you'll know everything. Yes, I am a rugby player. And I see the chat has been going. I'm sorry, guys, I haven't addressed that. I just wanted to burn through these really quickly and then get into the chat. I will get in there, and thank you for the people that I see answering questions and stuff. Which one lagged? I'm gonna wait. Which one lagged? This is yes, Rugby Jersey. Oh, stop it! I'm not the coolest. You're the coolest. Um, did everything fix itself from the lag? Sorry. Okay. His first question was about being enrolled at the University of Houston for computer science major, and whether that was a good program to be in. Lag, bane of my existence. Let me try shutting down some extra programs. The fun thing about doing this at 8 p.m. is it's the same time all of my neighbors in my apartment complex are getting home and watching internet videos. So I always have internet around this time. But he was asking about whether there was value in getting a programming degree as someone who wants to do game design, and I was saying yes, of course there is. Being able to program is huge as a game designer. Focus camera. There we go. Compiling hopefully shouldn't cause my video to lag. If I was compiling, yes. Jason P. Harris asks, I would ask, what advice would you give to someone who is willing to relocate to an area with game jobs but needs to have a job prior to moving? Also, for someone who is up to date on the current technology but has almost no free time from working a non-industry job, what is the best way to showcase your knowledge on your portfolio? First question, you don't necessarily have to relocate prior to getting a job somewhere. If you're getting into QA, yeah, you're probably going to have to relocate on your own. But if not, they're going to do the relocation. Moving to an area, the main thing it'll help you with is building that network, getting to know people in the industry in your area. So there's value there. If there's like a hotbed like Seattle or something that you think moving to would be a good idea. Get to know the network there. As far as finding a job, if you're currently working in a different industry, you can try and get a job there in that industry, or you can try and see if there's any QA positions and be like, hey, I'm moving there, even if you're not. I'm moving there soon. For someone who is up to date on the current technology but has almost no free time from working a non-industry job, what is the best way to showcase your knowledge in your portfolio? I would just make sure that your portfolio is up to date with stuff that you're ready to talk about. The most important thing is your portfolio should have things that you're proud of, but also things that you're willing to sit and have a conversation about how you did them. I would try and carve out some time to make sure that you're keeping up to date if you're still trying to get into the industry and working another job. Maybe find another job that pays a little bit less if possible, but allows you a little more free time. Luis Escudero asks, what's the feature that highlights UE4 among CryEngine, Unity, and so on? I'm not going to get super into this because I'm not a UE4 salesman, but it's free. And I use it. So it's awesome. Yeah, if you have other questions on that, there's tons of people who can answer that better than me, but it's free. And it's kind of the de facto industry use in AAA. What are some specific jobs in the game industry that are currently in high demand? I'm primarily asking for the art side, but feel free to cover other areas. This is from Zach Lyle. VFX artist. That is probably the most in-demand, least awesome, like as far as lots of awesome people job there is. The people who do it are incredible, are amazing, and to be honest, I wish I could do it because it's super cool. But VFX artist would be the main one. Tech artist would be the next one. Kind of going over that too. Somebody. Cloud and Kari says UI and UX is really popular right now. UI artist, yes, that would be my probably number 3 from an art standpoint. And then I would say from non-art positions, from programming positions, engine programming, gameplay programming, all those things. VFX artists they work in particles mostly, After Effects, and any that are maybe built in to the program, also Maya or some other modeling engine. Zach, I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to post a follow-up. From Zach as well, do you find yourself doing a lot of overtime or working while at home? So I have a fairly strict policy with myself that I don't really work from home unless I'm like sick. Some people like to work from home. I don't. I like to keep my home space, and my workspace. So, I'm totally willing to do things like this from home, but, I try not to check email too much from home. My team knows if something is really needed, they can call me, they can text me, anything like that. But I try to keep work and home separate. That's a fairly new thing that I've started doing in the last year, mostly because it helps my brain health. Do I work a lot of overtime? It really depends on the project, the company, and the time of the year. I've worked insane, horrible overtime that I would never wish on another human being in their life. And right now I'm working 8-9 hour days. That's it. Sometimes a 10-hour day will creep in there, but it doesn't really feel like when I'm working a 10-hour day, it doesn't feel like a 10-hour day. It's because I'm like so into whatever I'm doing or playing the game or something. But yeah, I would, if that's something that concerns you, it's worth looking into the history of a company and asking people that work there. I wouldn't necessarily ask it while on an interview, but I would definitely ask people that I might know through contacts about how often a place crunches. Zach asked one last question. Does augmented virtual reality look like it will become a commonplace within the next 5 years? And how will this affect the game development process? Yes, it's going to become commonplace in the next 5 years. How does it affect the process? The same way 4K, 60 frames per second, and all those things affect, it makes games more expensive. Because now, instead of someone having a controller, a TV, or whatever it is, a PC, like I'm at my PC right now, this is about how far I would game away, so I'm a foot and a half away. Now it's here. I'm going to walk up to every item you've made, and I'm going to be like, I see you didn't model all of the eyebrows. Yeah, your game sucks. So the quality bar is just going to keep going up and up, and that's why I've said a lot when I talk with friends is, there's AAA, there's like indie AAA, and now there's Quad A. Quad A is games like Call of Duty, right? Like the cost to make a game like that, or anything from Ubisoft, the cost to make those games, thousands of people, hundreds of millions of dollars, Destiny, games like that are just beyond the reach and imagination that we had 8 years ago. So yeah, it's getting crazy out there with all the VR. If you guys haven't checked it out, worth a check out. Jacob Argon asks, they say, if you want to be a game designer, start making games. If you want to be an artist, make art. My question is, if you want to be a producer, what can you do to show competency without being in the producer role already? Now, I read through these earlier, and then I forgot about them. And reading this question makes me smile because this is a great question. And man, wow, it's a great question, and it's a hard answer. You make games. You find teams that need your help, offer to produce them. Find any teams and be like, can I help produce you? You learn the other skills. I think one of the things that has made me good at being a producer, one of the things that often I get positive reviews from my team is that I know enough about most of their skills that I can talk or at least follow along without asking questions. So I know how to program. I know how to do a few other things. I don't really art. So when I'm in concept art meetings, I'm just like, pretty. But in general, I'm just a curious person, and I'm trying to continually learn about how people do things. But soft skills are the most important thing for being a producer. So working with teams If you can't work with a video game team, try and be a manager somewhere. Any type of management experience, any type of working with a team, mentoring people, anything like that is super important. But still, you have to make games to get into a producer role. Jacob again asks, I had an interview recently, and in the feedback I was told that I was too much of a multi-application person for a position. Is it a bad thing to focus on more than one area of the game development process when looking for a job in the industry, or is it better to just focus on one? It really depends on what you want to do. I have a lot of friends that are multi-skilled, and they don't necessarily fit into like a AAA studio, but they are amazing at an indie studio or on their own. If you're looking to get into a bigger studio, pick a skill that you want to do every day and focus on that skill, and then apply for those positions. You just asked about being a producer, so kind of having those multi-skills is a value as a producer. So yeah. Michael J. Ornicia, asks, I'd like to know, how does one set their rate of pay per hour or per model, animation project, etc. on an indie game for freelance artists? I'm an animator primarily and an indie developer looking to hire. Wow, this is a great question. And I was reading this question earlier, and I was like, wow, I don't know. So what I would say is there's a lot of great art forums where you can ask questions like this. John Jay, who works for Epic, John Jones, sorry, not John Jay. John Jones has information here as well on his website. You can look him up. He has information on how to do this kind of stuff. I would just ask around what the going rate is. I usually I work with outsourcers, but I don't work with the negotiation stage. I hand that off to the people who deal with the negotiation and the money, and they'd say, no, too much, too little, whatever. So I don't quite have the knowledge to answer your question. If this goes well, I'm hoping to bring other people on. Maybe I'll bring on somebody who can answer that question at some point. But definitely lots of other people out there who can answer that question. Adam Rutger Maddox Radford asked, I'm looking to be either an animator or a modeler. Is it likely for me to be able to do both on the same project, or is it more likely that I will be on one at a time? Again, depends on what size studio you go to. If you're working at an Ubisoft, you're going to model, and you're going to be a modeler, and you're going to model every day. I have a friend who is a modeler at Ubisoft, and he loves the job because he worked on 4 AAA titles in 1 year. That's awesome. But all he did was he makes guns. He loves that. That's his passion. That's what he wants to do, is just make guns and guns and guns, different eras, whatever. But that's what he does there. Now, if you go to work on a small team, 10, 15 people, you may do both. Again, same thing I've said before. Find out which one you absolutely love to do every day, and focus on that. 2 more questions, and then I'll jump over and read through the chat, and there will be this moment of awkward silence while I'm reading, and start pulling questions out. Maurice Johnson asks a pretty long question, but I felt like I needed to read the whole thing so I can kind of answer it. And I'm going to try and generalize my answer to not just you, Maurice. What does Epic Games look for specifically in their resume cover letters from artists in order to get an interview with the company? Start with that. That you shipped games, that your art is the best in the industry at what you do specifically, that you have a good website and an easy way for me to see your demo reel, either by sending it over or whatever. But experience with shipped projects, great art, those are the 2 biggest things. I am aware that a large portion of review is on potential employees, demo reels, websites, work samples, etc. But what specifically can I do to make my resume stand out even further, especially since I have had industry experience? I am a GDMS student at Full Sail with 7 months remaining in the program. I have had industry experience with a AAA company as a 3D artist. I network regularly and freelance on other people's projects on my own time outside of school, and I also create my own video games and high concept pitches as a hobby. I'm proficient with a bunch of different software. First off, that's awesome. You're killing it. You're doing great. I don't think you're gonna have any problems. But what I would say is that put all that stuff on your resume, man. Put the projects you're working on, the stuff you're freelancing, the experiences that you had. All of that already puts you above the approach of other people coming out of college. Put that stuff, put all that stuff together well in a resume. One page again. Try and get it on one page. Try and get it all there. Have good links to your portfolio, and be kick-ass at what you want to do. No problem for the long question, by the way. Last question before I get to chat. Gilberto Martinez asks, do you have any pointers or words of wisdom for good leadership practices in our industry? Wow, that is an entire talk in and of itself that I would love to give, and I have given multiple times. So leadership in the game industry is very interesting because it's a fairly newish field that people are realizing that we need development in. There's the cool thing is there's now coaches out there to work with people. I think one of the main things about being a leader in the industry is realizing that you're not alone and that you need help to be better. And this really goes across all disciplines. I tell people reading a lot of positive psychology, understanding where the newest science is on motivation, understanding how you can be in a position of leadership through whatever way works for you. I've tried, there's different types of leadership, and I've tried a lot of them. The one that I find works the best for me, and is totally going to sound pretentious to say, but is the servant leader, where I'm in a position that I'm serving the team, I'm helping. I'm not really in a position of authority. I'm more in a position of support. I've tried the lead from the front hero leader approach, which was great, but then I fell, so to speak, just like in a video game or a MOBA. I left, and the company slowly started to crumble. I had a hard time filling the roles that I was doing because I was covering so much stuff at once. There's a lot of great resources out there on leadership that don't necessarily fit just for the game industry, but are great about learning about leadership. John Maxwell is a great example. I even love listening to like Zig Ziglar's talks because, man, that dude is amusing to listen to, and his leadership advice, even though his tapes were made in the late 80s, still on point. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. I think one of the things I would start by doing is joining the IGDA production SIG and just kind of looking at the stuff that goes through there. It's really good. And also there's an IGDA book, IGDA producer book list that I kind of curate. I'll post it in the chat really quickly. That is really of value as well. So hopefully that answered all those questions. Thank you to those of you who brought those questions in early. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through the chat here and answering those questions as quickly as I can before I have to go. So let me post. So this is IGA production book list. Okay, I got to scroll up to the top of the chat. You guys have been killing it. I've seen, thank you for those of you who have been answering each other's questions. That is super helpful. Okay, so just starting at the top, Darkman X429, how do you balance your gaming career with your family? I don't have a family. No, so I do have family. None of my family lives around here. I'm not married. I don't have kids. Again, I could bring somebody on to talk about that better than I can. But family is really important to me. I try and vacation with my family, see my family 3 or 4 times a year. I have a bunch of nieces and a nephew, and I like to spend time with them. They really recharge my batteries. They get me excited, especially since my 5-year-old niece is getting into video games which is totally amazing. So yeah, that is an answer. Oh, sorry, Jade Eye Panda asked, "What is love?" Baby, don't hurt me. What Cloud and Kyrie, sorry. What advice would you give to a fresh college student for breaking into games? Can we aim high with AAA game studios, or should we stick to small companies for our first job? I would try the approach of I want to work in games, and I'm willing to work in games wherever. That's what I did. I applied to like 120 places. I interviewed at 2 places I absolutely loved, 2 places I was indifferent about, and I went to a place that I saw I could learn a lot, but I could grow even more in, and that was kind of what my approach was. Yeah, you may get straight into AAA, and you're going to learn a lot in there. AAA is kind of smaller now. There's fewer companies making AAA, but they're using more people. Christopher Sardina asks, I have an interview for a QA position at Epic Games this Wednesday. What should I do to prepare? Be ready to talk about your communication skills, talk about some bugs you've maybe found in the past in games. If you've ever been involved in early access of a game, talk about that. And yeah, just be ready to answer the questions. I'm sure they'll ask you some logic puzzles as well. Yeah, David, advice on being humble. Very important. Always be humble. Hello. Tony Wajnar, what's a good way to gain experience if you're having trouble landing even an entry-level job? Make games. Ask people online if they want to make games. Ask friends if they want to make games. There's plenty of communities online that are making games. Find a place to apply your skill. And if you can't find someone else to make a game with, make a game on your own. And keep trying for the entry-level job. And, sometimes working in QA is a way for you to get industry experience while you're working on your skills. Don Lyle asks, as an aspiring designer, I am straddling art and programming. I go back and forth often adding skills, both core and fringe as I go. Oh, sorry, you were answering someone else's question. I should read first. Don is answering questions like a madman. Yeah, freelancing, great example. Game dev map, awesome. Hasn't been updated in a while, but it's pretty good. Monster is a good place to find jobs. Don, your CA comment is completely true. Sorry, still. Doug, good comments on Orca HQ. Okay. Jay asks a scenario question. You're given the chance for a contract job at a AAA studio, but as it is a contract work, 6 to 12 months, they won't fly you out to the studio for an on-site interview. What do you do? So I would do one of 2 things. If I'm looking to get into the industry and I don't have a lot of money, I would probably take the gig. If nothing else is coming up, I would take the gig. If I had a little extra cash, I would say, hey, is it cool if I fly myself out there, not for an interview, I just want to see the space. I'd love to meet some of the people I would be working with, especially if it requires relocation. Most places wouldn't say no. That's what I would do. Daniel, yes, so CA we all, appropriate. And I know, guys, I'm way behind on this, so sorry. Tony, I started a project already with my brother, but I'm having trouble organizing it. Any suggestion? So I would write down everything you know that needs to be in the game. Not everything if the game is big, but hopefully your game is small because it's you and your brother. Write down everything you know that needs to be in a game. Put them on little cards, just 4x5 cards. Write them all down or sticky notes and lay them out and say, okay, here's everything. Now put them into different categories of like must do, would do, could do, or some people like to have must have, would be nice to have, don't have to have. Put them into buckets, whatever way you want to do it, and then start seeing how much time or who needs to work on what and start working through it that way. That's the basic way that I would start organizing. Yeah, don't apply to senior level if you don't have senior level experience. It's just annoying. You both have day jobs with erratic schedules. Hopefully you can get a weekend or a day to do that and then go from there. Yeah, I love Don. Good point. Just because you are on a first name basis with an HR director at a major studio, don't expect him to follow through with a job for you when you graduate. Yeah, I was on first name basis with multiple HR directors, and none of them gave me a job when I graduated. Does GPA really not matter in school? No, sorry, I should clarify. GPA does matter in school. It doesn't matter out of school. So what it does is it matters a lot in school, and if you're killing it with a 4.0 or anything above a 3.6, keep killing it. If you're passing classes and you're learning and you're getting the information, but you're not great at tests, don't worry about it. I think I had like a 3.3 in college, and I had a 4.0 my entire life up to that point. I just always tell people don't put a GPA on your resume unless you're a 3.9 or higher. And if you want to go to grad school, GPA definitely matters. Lag. Yes, I'm a rugby player, as we worked through. Is it better to make lots of small projects, or is it better to make one or two really big projects? I would tell you make small projects, because then you will finish them, which is just as important as starting a project. Do like 5 small ones, and if you finish all 5 of them, then do a big one. I do always wear my rugby jersey. It's my weird thing. Thanks for saying I'm the coolest. Everyone is hopefully playing the Fortnite beta in my building. That would be awesome. Tony asked again, is there a problem using a non-Unity or non-Unreal Engine when you're making a game if you're a designer? No. Just make it. I mean, I made a game in Twine, so really just making games. Darkman asked again the question about how do I balance wife and kids. I don't have one. Yeah, just don't have them. If you have them, you're probably more awesome than me. Okay, here's a great question from I Hartigan, which I think is Ian. Best choice for indies: work part-time jobs and put all your free time into the game, make a transition as the game starts to bring in revenue, or get loans, grants, investment, and work 24/7. This totally depends on you as a person. If you think, hey, I can keep a steady job and not be totally burnt out and work 4 or 5 hours when I get home every day, I would say do that. Steady income is good. If you're the type of person who is motivated enough to not have a job and live off credit card debt for a while, which I don't really recommend, but is a thing, and burning it 24/7, good luck. I would probably recommend the first one just because I like financial security, hence why I'm not indie. Ryan McDonald, shout out. What are you, and how did you get to it? I am a human, and I was born this way, just like Lady Gaga. I did a whole bit at the beginning about who I am and how I got here. So once the archive gets up, please check that out. How does one, Don, I like your comment of how does one find themselves as a producer? It's an enigmatic title. That was the title on my job that I was offered. Yeah, producers, project managers, development managers, all similar things. Yeah, you have a job title, and then you have the jobs you do, and in the industry, those are never the same thing. Jay, when I said 4 games in 1 year, he's an artist, so it's not really shotgun development approaches. They just have a bunch of different studios working on small things. Doug, yes, this should be archived on my YouTube channel right after this if I can remember how to do it. Do you feel you lose or enhance your creative freedom when working with a large company? From Cloud again. It depends on what you're doing on the project. Some designers want to own everything, and you're not owning everything on a big project. Some people just want to be creative in their space. I try and make games in my spare time, and I also do stuff at work. My creativity at work is organizational creativity, people creativity. I'll throw a game design idea in very rarely. Doug, who is my intern this summer, will tell you about how I kind of hammered that into him, that it's like you're there to support the team. You'll know the right moments when you should give game design feedback or game design ideas. But in general, I use my creativity in a different way there than I would use it at home working on my own projects. I've worked in small teams. I've worked in teams of three to four people. And I've worked on a project of over 200 people, and you just find different places to be creative. As a game designer, it's probably different, but for me, I was able to find creativity. Hex Pi asks, what does the industry look for in code samples? Clean code, good code, using data structures, making sure you don't have memory leaks, something you're proud of that you can speak to. Hopefully that was in a game. When I was a programmer, I had a save system, and I was really proud of that. I wrote it in like half a day, because all of a sudden we were like, we should have profiles in our game, and I was like, okay. And so I like wrote out the XML and did all this stuff, and I was able to do it in a day. But then I had like 4 other programmers and a professor look over it and help me clean it up, document it, and all that stuff. So make sure your code is clean and there aren't problems. Yeah, there are some great videos on TED about leadership. Where do you go to keep on top of motivational psychology? Google motivational psychology. There are a lot of good websites and things that give you information. I just read a lot. I don't have a wife and kids, as I said, so I read a lot, and I try and read the hot and up and coming stuff. It also helps that I work with a couple psychologists, so I also ask them questions. Darkman, what do you do when you're a family man and you apply for a company and you have the skills, but they ask you about a particular title you may have not played? Well, I would be honest. If you're applying to a company, play their games. Before I came and interviewed at Epic, I hadn't played, I think, Gears Judgment, or one of the Gears games. I can't remember which one I had. I think it was Gears Judgment. So I played through it and just got ready for it. When I applied to Epic or id, I played a bunch of Quake Live and just different stuff. Especially play their latest game. If you don't have time, try and watch some videos. But if they ask you a question about a game you haven't played, If you know nothing about it, just be honest. I haven't played that. I can't really answer the question. I just haven't had time to catch up on my backlog. If you at least know a little bit about it, say, hey, I haven't played it, but I know about it. Here's what I would talk about it. Full Sail family, CA family, you're all my family, Play everything just to be safe. I actually work with a dude who literally plays like every game that comes out. It is insane. Zach asked, when working on Rage, did you spend much time with Carmack? Not when working on Rage, but when I worked on Doom 3, BFG, and the Wolfenstein stuff, I worked with him really closely. Yeah, cool dude. Pretty awesome to work with a legend. Connor Maloney asks, how strict are programming tests at super companies like Blizzard or Valve? I am not the greatest with tests, but I am excited to apply to these companies. They're hardcore, I would assume. I've not applied as a programmer to either of those companies, but I know our programming test is really hardcore and we're really strict. It's a gate. We don't want anybody just applying for the position or getting into the interviews. It's a lot of time spent and effort spent to get past stage one, or to take someone past stage one. So most places are pretty hardcore. But don't think about it as a test, as just your writing code. Sorry, I missed the pun. Mark Differ asks, if you want to work at a AAA studio, but the only studios you have been able to work at made poorly reviewed or smaller games, does that type of industry experience work against you? How do you shake the stigma? No, you made games. I've made some really bad games. Well, the games may not be bad, but I've made some games I'm not proud of. I've also made games that no one's played. Non-shipped titles, an unshipped title, which is a story in and of itself, a title that was shipped and then taken off the shelves. And I also worked on bar games for a while that you had to go to a bar to play. People didn't know my games. People may not have played my games, but they knew that I had made games and I was able to speak about what I did in them. We've all made terrible games. Everyone in the industry has made probably one or two bad games. It may not have shipped, but they've made bad games. They've made games that are probably reviewed poorly. We don't really stigmatize people for that because we know there's a host of other things that go into making a game, not just one person. Do I want to grab Chipotle during GDC 2016? No, because Chipotle puts cilantro in everything, and it is the devil's weed. It's horrible. It makes me sick. Yeah, be honest. If you rather create than play, that's good. Just be honest. Do you just ask me anything or like what? Well, I mean, you can ask me anything. It doesn't mean I'm going to answer it. What's your favorite? What's my favorite? Doug asked me what's my favorite game of all time. Deus Ex, the first one, changed my life. Made me realize that you can do incredibly cool things with games, and really pushed me to want to make games for a living. And it's funny because the more I make games, the more I realize that a game like that is something I may not ever want to work on because it's so crazy big in that the player can do anything. I was lucky while working at id to work out of the office of Arcane for a while and see the stuff that they were doing with Dishonored. And man, that's just crazy. Those games are just utterly crazy. Oh, you were being facetious. Oh, look at you being facetious. Yes, the video will be up on YouTube after today. I'm very hyped for Mankind Divided. Don't worry, Cute. I'm Cute 5000. I'm also new to this Q&A thing. But I'm getting close to ending it out. I know I said till 9:30, but I'm going to end it here in a few more questions because I'm hungry. So I'll answer these questions that are coming in. Darkman X. If you could create your own game from scratch for your dream game, what would it be? So the dream game that I want to play is it was apparently Dishonored. So the game that I always wanted to make was a Deus Ex style game with lots of crazy things. You can change the story. You can change things. You have this crazy like underpinning story, but ultimately you're in a historical type setting. I always thought that would be cool. I always liked Victorian London, so I'm excited to play the new Assassin's Creed, waiting for it to come out on PC. So those were the games that I really wanted to make. I think as I get older and I've been making games and playing games longer, I'm kind of trending more towards away from games that are just like just about violence, just about killing. And I don't not like those games. I still play those games. But what I love about Fortnite is about so much more than just that. You do a lot of other things as well as that. So Fortnite is the game that I always wanted to make that I didn't know I wanted to make, and now I'm making it. So it's super cool. John LeBron Barron asks, what are your thoughts on VR, AR, etc. for games? Are you interested in any titles that make use of this tech? I'm super interested in Adrift, which hopefully most of you have heard of, which is a VR game. It can be played without VR, but it is really the game that I think is going to work super well for VR. I think VR and AR are going to be huge over the next 5 years. You have a company like Facebook pushing it, Sony's pushing it, Microsoft's pushing those things. They're all being pushed. I have a lot of friends that work on different platforms, from Oculus to HoloLens to Project Morpheus. And the things that they are saying are in the pipe are just absolutely mind-blowing. So, super interested in everything new coming out there. Yeah. Jedi Panda asks, have you ever mishired someone? I have not. I have been at companies where someone has been mishired and then let go at a later date. The team very quickly said, this is not working. Colin Sullivan asks, any advice for final project at Full Sail? So this kind of goes for all people working on senior projects. Pick something smallish, something that you can complete in a demo sort of way. Decide what genre you want to do. Do you want to be artistic? Do you want to take something to the next level? Or do you want to do, like, I made a casual game because I like casual games. And my team thought that would be something cool to get in. Other than that, yeah, really just working together as a team and being focused and constantly cutting scope. Any advice, Adriana O'Shea asks, any advice for getting accepted for CA at GDC, or is this all random? No. It's not random. They read every application. The main advice I would say is be very conscious of writing a good essay, because I've been doing this. If I get in, I've done 8 years. I've done 9 GDCs, including a GDC online. So I've done 8 years, 9 GDCs, and every year I write my essay expecting not to get it, and that I write it as passionately and as wholehearted in it every year, because I don't just say, I'm Grant, let me in again. Every year it matters. And be awesome, and know awesome people. Y'all talking about Chipotle, whatever. Hey, Matt. As far as advice, resources on how to learn to appropriately estimate your time or tasking, that's a constant thing that you learn with yourself. I'm sure if you look online or look at that book list, there might be some things there. I constantly am just rechecking myself with my estimate. Okay, I said it was going to take me 2 hours. It took me 4 hours. Where was I off? Was the code different? Things like that. Just it's a constant learning process. Yeah, I'll post the book list on the Facebook group. Darkman asks, what are my thoughts on tests in the industry? They seem to be ridiculously long and overbearing. It depends on the place. depends on the position. I think having a test for programming and an art test is good because it shows that you haven't lost your skills. For example, I have a decent portfolio as a programmer, and I could go apply for a programming job right now, but I haven't programmed professionally in a long time. So I would want to be tested. So I think there's a place for them. I think there's a place for them depending on the position. I've heard of places that do a production test. I don't really know how that works, but yeah. John asks, how important do you think mods are? Should everyone mod? I mean, I started out modding. I think now there's enough tools out there to just build your own games. But if you get the opportunity to do mods, it's the same thing. You're working on something and finishing something. So it's just as important. What's something, Connor asks, what's something that is personally eye-catching to you when looking over a character artist portfolio? So I'm not an artist, so generally the artists say this is a good person or a bad person. But for me, it's good art. You know, I'm not an artist, so I can't tell the difference between the #2 character artist in the world and the #1 character artist in the world, but I can tell the difference between someone who knows what they're doing and understands characters, forms, and how to make something for a game, and someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Obviously, if you make an amazing character and you have a super low poly count, I'm going to be like, what? So yeah. Yes, I will not go eat Chipotle, but I will go eat soon. You're all welcome. Thank you for being here. Hopefully this went well. And Darkman, your last question. I work for Epic, so therefore I prefer Unreal Engine. I've used all of them. Unreal really is top of the line. All right, so thank you all for joining me. This was super fun. As I said, I would love for this to become a monthly thing, and I would love for other people to join me in answering. I've already talked to a couple of my friends because I don't want to be a talking head just answering the same questions every month. That being said, I would love for any comments, feedback, both on YouTube or Facebook about things that we could do better. You know, this event is really for you guys, for anyone who wants to be involved in games, and you know, just want to help out. All right, so thank you all, and if you missed anything, it will be in the archive of the video. Thank you.